Hi, in this lecture you will learn how to specify the timing of triggers in details, and we'll make our first example about the triggers. As we have learned in the previous lecture, we have three options to specify the timing of our triggers. The first one is before. If we specify our trigger with before, our trigger will be fired right before the specified event occurs in our table. So when we use before timing statement, with this way we can prevent wrong data inserts, and so we eliminate the unnecessary process times. Because the DML is not done yet, and we prevented that operation. So we gain performance from both the DML time and from the rollback time. Besides, we can protect our data from some unintentional or harmful changes. Besides, we can prevent some users to make some operations, so we increase the security of our tables. This is an important gain. We can specify default values for the columns. This is also used in so many times. We can assign some default values for some columns. You may say that we can assign some default values for the columns already with using the default keyword, etc. So why do we need that? Yes, we can do that, but these values work only when no data is set for these columns. Besides, these default values are generally very simple values or static values. But with before triggers, we can derive some values for the columns by calculating or getting from other tables, or with using some functions, etc. For example, we can get the name of the database user and write it to the changing user column, etc. Or for many reasons like that. This is also a useful gain. We can validate complex business rules. You can have your own business rules in your company. For example, you may say that allow this insert only if these calculations are true, or for so many reasons like that. So mainly, you can use before option when you need to do some last things just before the specified DML operation is done. But notice that the change has not done yet. If we specify our trigger with the after option, our trigger will be executed right after the specified event occurs in our table. I mean, if you set your trigger for after update, this trigger will be fired right after any update occurs in our table or view. So when we use the after timing statement, you may want to make some after checks. Since the DML operation has done, you may want to make some last checks because the changes are not committed yet, so you can easily roll back if you find out that the new values are not suitable for our standards, etc. You may want to duplicate your table or add log records. Actually, this can be done with the before statement too, but since the change has not done yet, there is no need to insert a log record or the duplicate record, because there is the possibility of rejecting this row. So you will need to roll back from the log tables, etc. So doing this in after triggers will be better for performance. But if you want to have the logs of each attempt, you need to use the before triggers. It's up to your business logic. So basically, you can use the after option when you need to do some last things right after the DML operation is executed. In here, the change has already done, so the column values may be different. And instead of. If we specify our trigger as instead of trigger, this time our trigger will be executed instead of the specified triggering event. So you can say that if some update happens on this table or view, do not make that update. Instead, run this trigger. So you prevent the update, but did something within your trigger. This is generally used for views because views are not always modifiable. It may seem so simple to update with the view, but the SQL behind it can be very complex. So you may not be able to modify it directly. But with using this trigger, you can do it instead of the user. So this will help the user to update very simply, but you will be doing the real work behind the view. We will see that later with more details. there can be multiple triggers with the same timing points on a table or view. Alright, we can have more than one trigger on the same table or view. Actually, we can have more than one trigger with the same timing point on the same tables or views. Actually, this is not what we want, because we know that before triggers work before the after triggers normally. But which one of the before triggers will work first? We don't know. The database decides it and it changes. So instead of doing that, you need to collect all these triggers which have the same timing points into one trigger. But only if the order of the operations in them is important. If not, you can create as multiple. But if the order of working times between each other is important, just write them within a single trigger. However, if you want to divide them anyway, maybe because of decreasing the code crowd, etc., you can use follows and precedes clauses to order the working times among each other manually. You will see that. Great. Now it's time to create our first trigger. So let's open up the SQL Developer and start creating our first DML trigger. Alright, since this is the first example of the triggers, we will start from the simplest one. But don't worry, you will see so many real-world usages in the next lectures. This is just for showing the usage of triggers. Great, so let's start then. To create a trigger, again we have two ways to do it. The first one is creating it by using the SQL Developer tool. In this lecture, I will show you on this way. In the next lectures, we will be creating manually. As we know, every object of the database is collected under the schemas. So triggers are in there too. To see that, let's open up our HR schema. And you can see the triggers branch here. All the triggers created under that schema is collected here. So let's open it up. As you can see, we already have two triggers here: secure employees and update job history. Now, here, as you can see, there are icons with balls and broken arrows at the left of trigger names. If these icons are colorful, that means your triggers are valid, completely working. If not, I mean if they are with a gray color, that means they are disabled. So you can understand easily if they are working with this way. If you see a red X icon on it, that means it is invalid. You will see them detailed in the next lectures. Alright, you can double click on them and see the create code of that trigger. As you can see here, it writes create or replace trigger, keyword, and then secure employees, which is the name of the trigger. Then it specifies the timing. It is before here. Then it specifies the event. The creator wanted this trigger to run with multiple events: insert, update, and delete. You can do that with separating them by the OR keywords. Then it has the object name. It is the employees table here. Then the begin block including a procedure in it. As you can see, since there is a begin block, they did not use the call command. They simply wrote the procedure name, just like how we did in the standard anonymous blocks. Maybe this is one of the simplest trigger examples, but let's create our own trigger example with using the tool. To do that, we simply right-click on the triggers branch here first. As you can see, we have the filter option here and refresh option here, and the other options. And we have the create trigger option at the top. New trigger. We can easily create a trigger by clicking on this option. So let's do it. As you can see, we have a new window for creating the trigger. These windows create us the create codes easily, but they don't create the objects, only return the create codes. So even if you don't know any coding experience, you can easily create objects with these create windows in SQL Developer. So in here, we can select the schema name that the trigger will be created on. And here we specify the name of our trigger. Let's simply write here first trigger. Below it, we have a checkbox saying add new resource in lowercase. If you check here, this will prepare the code as lowercase. Otherwise, it will be written as uppercase. We generally write some text upper and lower together to increase readability. But it's up to you. But for now, let's check here and see if it works. And below it, we specify the base type of that trigger. Means, will we create the trigger on a table or view or schema or the database itself? We select table for now. Then we select the schema of the base object. In here, we specify the schema name of the table that we selected. Of course, if we select table upwards. It can be view and schema too. But if we select database above, this area will not be available. So let's select HR from here. Then we select the base object. Here it shows the tables, views, etc. of the specified base object schema. We can see the list of the tables in the HR schema because we select table for the base type and HR for the base object schema. So let's select employees copy table here. As you can see, when we select the table name, the available column names are listed here, but they are unreachable for now. The reason is, as you have learned, the column names are used when we use the update of event. Since we haven't chosen the update event, they are inactive. Great. Now it's time to select the timing of that trigger. As you can see, we have two options here, before and after. So let's simply select before for the timing. Then we select the event. We have three options here: insert, update, and delete. So let's first select the insert for the event. To choose it, we select from the available events box here. And then click on the blue arrow or greater than sign here. If you click on double greater than sign, it will take all the event types into the selected events box in one step. But I don't want to select them all for now. So let's simply click on a single one and take the insert into the selected ones box. Great. But for now, I want my trigger to be fired for both insert and update commands. So let's simply select the update event too. As you can realize, as soon as I select the update event, the available columns are turned to active status. Here, if we want to use the update of columns event, we can select one or more columns from here. But if you don't select any, it will not be an update of event. It will be the update event. And this will mean that any update of any column will fire that trigger. So for now, to make a simple example, let's not select any column and pass that option. And at the bottom, we have two more areas: referencing old as and referencing new as. As you know, this will give an alias for the new on old identifiers. We generally do not write anything in here, but for now, let's write something. Let's write $X for the old as alias and $Y for the new as alias. Great. The last thing in here is selecting whether this trigger will be a statement level or a row level trigger. I will explain that in the next lecture, so for now, let's skip it. Alright, now it's time to get the create code of our first trigger. So let's simply click OK. As you can see, this window prepared the create code of our first trigger, all with lowercase text. since we selected before for the timing and insert an update for the event, they are all written into here. Besides, it aliased old as $X and new as $Y. But for now, there is no need to specify this. This is optional. So let's delete this line. Since we create our trigger in the HR schema and the table is already in HR schema, there is no schema prefix on the trigger name and the table names. If we would use another, it would write the schema prefixes too. Alright, now let's simply create our trigger. As you can see, we have our trigger. Let's check it. This trigger will fire right before each insert and update events, and only if this event occurs on the employees copy table. However, this trigger does not do anything. So let's simply put some message to see that this trigger works or not. Let's write dbms output dot put line, and let's write our message and insert or update occurred in the employees copy table. Alright, now let's compile it. Great, now our trigger does something. As we know, our trigger will automatically be fired on any update or insert operations. So let's simply execute an update command and see if it will work or not. So now let's pass to the worksheet. And write update employees copy set, let's say salary is equal to salary plus 100. Now let's run the query. As you can see, we have the output that we typed in our trigger. So that means our trigger has fired automatically. But as you can see, 107 rows updated text is printed before our text in the trigger. But don't let this confuse you. This is about the put line buffer style. I mean, first our trigger is fired, then the rows are updated. Do not confuse. Great. Now let's delete the rows and see if our trigger will work or not. Because we know that we specified our trigger for only insert and update events. So let's write a simple delete command. Delete from employees copy. Now let's run it. As you can see, our text is not printed. So our trigger did not run. So now let's roll them back. No need to keep these changes. Great. Now we know how to create a trigger basically with using the SQL Developer tool. And we saw how it works on an example. In the next lectures, you will learn something new in each lesson and will be able to make more efficient and real-world-like triggers. So this is the end of this lecture. See you in the next lectures.